been working with that this week specifically quite a bit. I'm going back to some old school texts that talked about it, and just trying to bring myself up to speed, because some of these areas are definitely not where my strong suit is, even though I have a strong interest. And I think that's that strong interest, that love for the game here, that's helping me cut through some of these works that might be a little bit outdated or old, or people just, I don't know. One of these works that we're going to talk about today is called the Liber Abaci from 1202. What, the Liber Abaci? We're going to go back to Leonardo of Pisa, who found the golden ratio. He was talking about that in that book at the time, and that's not wasn't the main focus of that book. In fact, he actually was working on a way to introduce a Hindu-Arabic numerical system to Europe at the time. Fibonacci introduced this system there in 1202, and he released this book, and it helped with currency conversion. It revolutionized that. And in this book, he talks about a problem with rabbits. Yeah. But in that, he comes up with something called the golden ratio. Basically, in a nutshell, if you take a length and you divide it by its longest part, its shortest part, a couple of them, you get what's called the golden ratio. And the golden ratio is 1.618. It's a number, it's a equation that we see in nature, from things like seashells all the way up to galaxies, like the arms of them in spiral galaxies. They often follow this logarithmic spiral, which is very approximate to that golden ratio. And it's weird discovering, from 1202, this guy writes about this in a book. Now, that concept wasn't new at the time. That was an actual coming back from even Hindu beliefs in old Sanskrits, talking about the sacred geometry. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more later on in this kind of series, because I do believe there is quite a bit in that sacred geometry. I know that we've had many top-level scientists, quantum computers, working on this sacred geometry type stuff, where we're finding there is some coding, there's some things that are interconnected in the universe. And the Fibonacci golden ratio is definitely one of those supporting numerical, mathematical things. That golden ratio, 1.618, we see that even in things like trees branching. We see these, welcome in everybody, we do see these things all through nature. A book from 1202, and like I said, this actually goes way back, and we're studying this even more in 2026. Now, is there hard coding in the universe? How many people believe that? Let me ask the community. You guys believe in sacred geometry? Do you believe that there's underlining code in the universe? We are unsure in the science community. You'll get about half of us that say, yeah, we're absolutely sure. And then you'll get half of us that says, there's no way in the quantum universes can there be one single universal code. But it is strange that when we look out, the farthest we can see in space, like the black holes that are circling mega suns, we can see geometry in there. In fact, we can see the golden ratio in there. So that's one thing that blows my mind when we start studying just small levels of the connection between what we see inside of us as well as the universe. And we talk about that with Itzhak Bentov. I usually talk about Itzhak Bentov. Welcome in. Everybody's welcome in. Tell me your beliefs, whether you believe in, is there a universal code? Do you believe it's in the consciousness? Do you believe that we're still working on it? Do you believe math is it? Do you believe in sacred geometry? Put some comments down below. Like I said, this is a community open for discussion. I talk about it a lot on here. I like doing super deep dives. Like I said, I am literally reading Liber Abaci 1202 from Leonardo of Pisa. He was founder of the Fibonacci sequence. That's what it's a golden ratio. It's the sum of two before it. So it goes 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. And at the time, like I said, he was talking about rabbits, and that was crazy. Like I said, he did steal this as well as he was trying to teach Europe at the time about the Arabic, Hindu Arabic numerical system, which did catch on. And there's a whole rabbit hole about that one. So get a chance, go read that stuff. Go, if you get a chance, like I said, go visit some of my works. I've been working hard on this. My ebooks on Amazon are doing really well. The channel, you know what? I've just been starting this. I haven't even been doing this for a little while. I love the passion. I love coming out here doing this deep research, finding out from the community, what is everybody believing? Do you believe that it might be possible? Do you think there's an underlying code? I'm not sure. This is what I think about. I take a look at all the coding, like the Fibonacci sequence. I said, if I had all this and I suddenly got teleported to another universe, would that still hold? Those are the questions that I kind of keep up at night. I feel like if I woke up on a planet that the calculations that I could make on gravity would be okay. A lot of the calculations should hold. But then again, I don't know. How close are we to a black hole? How close are we to unknown phenomena that we just don't know about? Things like gravity. It's hard to code some of this stuff. And we're looking at the time crystals now. It's like time crystals. Yeah, time crystals. In real science, we've isolated them now. This is some of the stuff in the research that we're doing now, and I think that there is some coding in there. You don't have to be a mathematician. You don't have to have $1 billion hadron collider, $1 trillion hadron collider. You just need to maybe sometimes look at the universe. And I kind of think, man, some of these people, like Itzhak Bentov, who I do a lot of work with on this channel, I think they might add something here. I think if they had more of what we have today, more resources, more people willing to be open-minded about this, I definitely think they would be more down to do some cool consciousness research. They would dig what we're doing. If you're digging what we're doing here, hit that like, hit that subscribe, help support the channel. I like coming on here talking about science. I like talking about possibilities. If you believe that you might have some idea, put it down below. If you want to help support the channel, just comment. I just want to thank everybody for being here. Not everybody can be here. Most of the people that I have, my subscribers on this channel, are probably asleep. A lot of them are from Europe. I'm actually in northern Michigan right now, just finishing doing a lot of coding sequence. And I'm seeing things, as a scientist, you can't be, you got to remove your personal beliefs, but as a philosopher, that's all you have. So I would rather have more philosophers out there, because not everybody can be a scientist or a mathematician. We literally have limitations, but everybody can be a philosopher. That's what I like. I like it when people propose ideas. And I study a lot of scientists from way back in the day. They propose some ideas and they actually end up being true. These weren't clairvoyants. Itzhak Bentov is one of those people. Erwin Schrödinger proven that with his What is Life book about the aperiodic crystal. These are philosophers that threw an idea out in the world and people jumped on it. They had great ways to tackle these problems that the philosophers themselves didn't have at the time. Welcome in, everybody. Yes, you can definitely ask questions here. You are what you repeatedly do, Aristotle. I think so. I think there's a lot to be said with that. I think if you are somebody that enjoys art and you're into art and you're doing art, whether you're good or not, you're an artist. So I think that holds true with philosophers. If you're into it, you have the love for it. I talk about this on the channel a lot. Sheer determination, love for the game. If you've got those two things, I've seen scientists cut through that math and science like butter. Ramajan, Indian, was a great example. He had no prior knowledge of math, and the numbers theories that he came out with, unlike anything else. I think Einstein and Newton were the same way. Get out of here. Coming on here, I am going to remove you. I'm going to report you. If you come on here and don't talk about, you don't contribute, I understand that you guys have, things going on. I get trolled too much on this channel, and I just immediately report and remove everybody. So, our trolley bus problem. I'm not sure about that one. That's a good question. I do open all questions on here. I'm mainly trying to talk about coding today and whether people believe in that one. I do think more people should commute. I think the idea of everybody having a vehicle, the idea of having a truck and nothing in the back of it all the time, I think these were things we used to have back in the heyday. Hopefully that answers that question. But I'm going to go back on the topic just for a little bit. If you do have some more, I definitely like engaging with the audience here. I definitely believe in, at this point in 2026, we should have been a lot farther along. I think money was not spent in the places that it should. I think the more that we realize that we are one human species, and that we are surviving on a spinning sphere going faster than a bullet through space and we don't know enough about it. I think that's where the threat is. I think that's where our money and research need to be, is taking care of our people on this planet. I think that by separating us, going to war, it's a waste of people, resources. I think it's very not where we should be, definitely in 2026. I know that there's a lot of smart, really smart people out there. And I think if those smart people were more in power, I think that we could get over these things a little bit better. But I understand we're in a horrible situation with the economy. I understand that there's a lot of things going on. I understand there's a lot of old money phasing out here in the next few years. I do believe that changes are coming for the better. I believe the old system's going to be going away. I think as new legislature happens, we are going to be getting rid of some of those bad things that we had before. Oh, sorry, I do not have my glasses on. So, what do I think about that? Sacrificing one for five? Well, that's very situational, and I think that it's hard to answer that without. Generally don't believe in that, and the reason for that is because there's generally a situation that we got ourselves in there to begin with. As a scientist, we're throwing out that whole thing about responsibility and all of that. We would take a larger view of it. What was at stake, who was responsible, what was going on there. There's a lot more context to that. We do discuss that a little bit, especially on consciousness on here, because you have to remember where I'm at, and my enlightened state right now is that everybody is on their own individual enlightened journey. Okay, that's where we're at. We're learning. Carl Sagan, Cosmos would say, it's you doing that is the universe learning to know about itself. Okay, and there's Bentov and a few others would say that we are in this path of learning, trying to be more enlightened, knowing, wanting to be more positive, wanting to grow, wanting to learn more out of this entropy, because generally when complex systems arise, they go into chaos, right? So there's got to be something inherent in there, and tying this back into coding, that I do think inherently there's some coding inside of each person, and I think for every situation, there is a cause and reaction, and I do think everything is situation. How I would approach things is very situational, depending on the overall situation. That's what I got on that one. So I'd love to know your guys' opinion. Would you? I see it all the time in military. They definitely sacrifice one to save 10. I've seen a lot of people heroically throughout the years in wars do that. And it's absolutely brave. I'm not stealing any bravery from these people or anything like that. As a scientist, I wish we could have not had them there to begin with. I feel like we failed as a human species to have them there to do those heroic things. I think the heroic activities, I wish we could have learned from them. The first war is what I wish for, and learn from that and grow. And that's really where I think humankind and our species needs to be here in 2026. I think that as we learn and grow and realize we're hurting ourselves, not just some people that live on the other side of the world, we are the world, okay? We will learn that we're hurting ourselves, and we'll learn to grow, and we'll learn to make things right without force, without fear, hopefully with kindness, compassion, and love. I've seen those break a lot of walls. And, I've also know that medieval situations call for medieval techniques. Don't get me wrong. But I'd like to think that we're going into an Enlightenment era. I'd like to believe that, maybe we have learned something from these last wars. We've lost enough good people. This this Olympics, I watched somebody, they had a helmet, and they had a bunch of people that had died in the war on their helmet. And it was really good graphics. I could see their face. I could see how we've lost. These were very, these were people. These were our people. This was everybody's people. And how we lost a lot of great people in this war so far. And I do hope that we discover more about the coding inside of us, that the heart code with the positivity and the love is such a stronger number than anything else that we can kind of try to calculate, especially through hate, through war. I think the numbers, the math don't math on those, ever. Even in the money-making ways, people don't win. People generally lose. Certain people might win when it comes to who benefited from the war, but us as a species always loses. War never changes. So that's what I've got on that one. I'm going to go back to a little bit about, we talked a little bit, it's hard to go from such a deep, hard war conversation about the hard coding in people. And I think that's something that got hard. It was soft coded. We talk about hard coded, we talk about soft coded. I think war and segregation, separation for the human species is a very soft coded thing. Where hard coded, I think we have a lot of built in love. There's a lot of love to protect their families, to do well. And I think sometimes that lends itself to some of the darker sides of the human species. But here in 2026, with the technology that we have, ways to grow food, ways to communicate, ways to interact, and in a more positive light, I think that we definitely have, that's where we should be in 2026. I'm hoping, I don't think it's going to happen until 2027, 2028. We're working on it. A lot of us want peace. We need to get this work done. War stops that. There's a lot of us working on some deep, heavy rooted stuff that can help our society and our world. And I think when people really start seeing that, hey, we got to stop, and I need you guys just to stop for 5 minutes, because the materials that I need to do what I need, and for the research, for them to finish the research that they need, we need to be able to do that. And by this war and this hatred and this religion stuff and going on, we're not able to do this stuff. We've solved a lot of cures for diseases in the past, things like polio, bubonic plague. We've fixed a lot of stuff, and we'll continue to fix stuff. But we need to chill out on the hate and that kind of stuff. So that's where I'm at with all of that. As an American, as someone who's trying to find what, not the blame, but I'm trying to find where do we go from here. That's really going to be the next, I think, episode vertical podcast that I do is, where do we go from here? How can we do the complex research that we need to do, like building a larger Hadron Collider that's much, much larger through multiple countries to finally get some of the answers that we need to solve very complicated stuff, so we can solve very basic stuff here when we can't get along, when those countries are getting bombed, when those people that we need to help work on these sophisticated things are just getting killed. What are we supposed to do against such reckless hate? How can some of us scientists overcome this? So that's where I've got for that one right now. I do appreciate everybody coming in today. I do appreciate all the support, the love for the research, for the scientists, for the stuff that we're trying to do. And it's difficult. It's hard to get love for this boring ass science sometimes. But what a lot of people like is the results. They like hearing crazy stories. They like hearing that we've solved this. They like hearing that we've got warp drives coming. They like hearing things like we've captured time and time crystals. These are real things that we're doing. But for us to continue doing this, we need the war and we need the other shit to chill out. We need everybody to get on board with the concept that we are one species on this planet. We need to solve this stuff. We can solve problems with droughts. We can solve some of this stuff with people, with machinery, with creating water in wells, and we can capture some of this stuff. We can help a lot of people. We can. A lot of people that have nothing to do with war, have nothing to do with, they're just trying to survive. We're trying to make things better. And I think a lot of us here at the scientific communities are. I think that's the drive behind it. But damn, when we run into problems like war, it's so stupid. I'm going to say it on my channel because I'm a podcaster and I don't care. War is stupid. It's unnecessarily stupid, especially in 2026. Things get solved. More complicated problems get solved than war and discrepancies between people. Super more complicated things on Earth get solved beyond that. Why can't we just solve that? Well, there's some people involved. Well, that's why I'm saying it's going to be a time phasing out some of this culture, some of this soft code, segregation soft code that a lot of people have inside of them that they got from older generations. It is going to be a generational improvement, is what we're seeing in models and the numbers. You cannot solve it right now. Cannot fix this because we need old thoughts of segregation phased out. And that's what's happening because luckily the newer generation is seeing this as we need to be more of a humankind. What that comes from, a lot of it is your upbringing. You know, those old school fools, when they were getting upbringing, they saw a lot of war videos. They saw a lot of people versus people, and it was okay. It was just desensitized towards war and what war could do and be and all that. All those movies, they glamorized war. Sometimes for good reason. Here in 2026, with the technology, the forces that we have and the powers that we have, that should not be a normal thing. But I think nowadays war is not glamorized. I think the war movies are gone. People aren't watching that. They're watching YouTube, Hulu. I think they're watching things like The Mandalorian, and they're thinking, wow, war, how crazy. But anyways, that's what I got on that one. Let's get back to universal coding because I really wanted to talk about that today. I wanted people's opinion, whether you think universal coding, is there something there? Do you believe physics? Do you think laws? The law of motion, a lot of these do carry over, but sometimes when we get close to phenomena like, I don't know, black holes or dark energy, dark matter, things like that, or the quantum level, things get weird and spooky science. So that's what we're talking about today. I like that it hasn't been solved, and we talk about that on this channel a lot because it's nice to look up at the stars and still have mystery. When I was a kid, when I was really young and looked up at the stars, I thought, wow, that is amazing. What is that? And then as I grew up and I learned what stars were, it took some of the magic out of it. But as I learned more about science, I learned that there are far more questions and things far more interesting and to look up and figure out. But that's what I'm trying to do here on my channel. If you liked any of this, please hit that like and subscribe. Go check out my channel. I did make a bunch of cool videos about scientists, about time, about other random stuff. I try to do this podcast every day, so hit that notification bell if you want to hear some random ramblings from someone who gets probably far deep into research than they should. If anybody has any questions, definitely always post them down below. I always like it when people come on and they post some things, as long as it's containing to the subject or at least having something to do with science. I'll talk about it. I try not to. So many trolls come on here, and I was even talking to a friend of mine, and they were saying, man, how you shouldn't do vertical live. There's actually more people that get on there and they're trying to sell stuff or troll or whatever it is than there are real people. And I thought about that. I thought about it for hours. In fact, I thought about it for 2 days. You know what I came to? Here's what I came to. Is that on my Itzhak Bentov meditations, I say this line, and I truly believe this at the end of my meditations, is that if I can reach out to just one person and get them to start opening their mind to maybe some cool concepts, or I can open their mind to maybe trying meditation or looking into consciousness research, some of those really smart people who just haven't really looked into it a whole lot, they would give us such an interesting perspective. Maybe open up some new fields that come up with some ideas we haven't thought about before. Like I said, if I can just reach one person to go out there and try meditation or consciousness, then for me it's completely worth it. Because a lot of people say, well, one person, that doesn't seem like a lot. One person isn't a lot until you are that one person. It's strong. I say that on the end of my meditation journeys because I do believe in it. I believe that one person can change the world, its eyes or views toward things. You know, we have a lot of famous people that are like that, who were nobodies until they opened their mouth and started. What did they have? Sheer determination, love for the game. I do thank you guys for all being here. Special shout out for everybody who contributed, said some comments on here today. For all you that, here, I'm going to show you. This is my dog. This is my dog, Lamb Chop. She's a poodle. Here, come here, girl. Here, sit with Papa. This is my dog, Lamb Chop. She is a blind poodle. She has traveled all over the United States with me, gone cross country. She got diabetes about 2 years ago, a year or two now, and she needs to get 2 shots a day, one in the morning, one in the evening. A lot of people usually have their animal put down, is what the vet said when they found out. And I said, oh no, I would never put this dog down. This dog is family. And so she's that's Lamb Chop. And like I said, we actually got her in northern Michigan. We took her out to Washington, where we lived for a while. She's actually been in a few other states, and now she's back in Michigan with us. So we call this the senior kind of community in this house, because we're taking care of a senior pup and our senior cat. But just a little bit about me. I like giving some personal information about who I am, what I've got going on in my life. It helps to have a communication. You know, it helps to relate with other people that may have animals, pets, maybe got some other stuff going on. I will be starting to do some more of these outside. The snow is just starting to melt here in northern Michigan, and we had a crazy cold winter this year. I don't know about where you guys are. Did you guys have a cold winter? Did you see some freezing stuff you're not normally used to? I've been back in northern Michigan for a couple years now, and so I'm kind of used to the coldness. I lived here before for a few years, but this last winter was pretty nuts, even for the locals. It was polar vortex is what we call it. It's kind of a crazy time. I know a lot of the lower states that almost never see any action as far as cold got just snapped. A lot of people lost, power, lost their homes, lost some lives. My heart and condolences go out to those people. It's definitely one of the things that I consider when I live here in northern Michigan, when I need to kind of possibly make it through the winter. I watch these videos too about like relations, the coding. And I was watching a guy go to his Costco in Alaska. He spent over $3,000 on supplies for the winter because when winter hits in Alaska, that's a whole nother type of winter. You get locked in, you need to have supplies, you need to be ready. And here in northern Michigan, the power went out for a little bit. It depends on where you are. If you're way out there, a lot of those people have backup generators. They've got a lot of other stuff going on. So it's weird though, wherever we go, we're finding people are doing some of the same things. They know about the how to overcome definitely some extreme temperatures wherever you are in the world. And it's amazing to watch people adapt, and inherently, learn from each other and learn from what works and what doesn't work. And we find that in even to this day in the lab when we're talking about math or science and we're doing some stuff. And it's like, how did they do that? Oh, they used, and then we'll go ahead and we'll use that. That happens all the time, and that's why philosophers' ideas are so important. It's like, how did you overcome? Well, it's because we used a X-ray diffracting machine, and we found an X, and it ended up being a helix, and then that's how we found out about DNA. It was a lot of these really obscure, random things that were happening that we made discoveries on elsewhere, and that's why the combination of the fields, from quantum theory to all the way into computation, and especially in today for AI work and that kind of stuff, how that cross kind of it helps. It solves problems in one field, will sometimes lend itself to solving problems in another field. And why is that? It's that underlining code. It's the underlining physics or math behind how we solved this problem in, say, biology. And now we're over here and we can extrapolate. I'll give you a good example of something that we're working on in the lab right now is it's static electricity biology or ecology. There is so much more now that we know, especially in 2026, about the part of how the Earth's electrostatic system affects nature, bees, how the relationship with there is some things that we never saw before that was right in front of us, and how a tick gets attracted to your leg through static electricity, things like that, and other creatures. A lot of people think they just jump, and that's not really the case. A lot of it gets carried through the currents of electrostatic ecology. And we're finding amazing things about our nature right in front of us, and there's math in there. That's the great thing. And so we are finding some code. Now, would that code, say, transfer to another universe? There are limitations for some of this stuff, and generally it has to do with the phenomenon surrounding said code. Say a black hole, right? We talk about black holes, how light can escape it, and and things like that. But what we don't talk about a whole lot is how black holes eat information, and that's really it's a very strange thing. When you eat information, when you strip information down over time, it breaks up into very interesting things and new stuff when you break things that way in physics. But what we look at is when we look at the galaxies and we can see something like the golden ratio, something discovered way back in the day, really refined in 1202. We take a look at how things here on Earth, like shells, have the same golden ratio as things like galaxies, roughly, And we look at the numerical numbers. And how can that be? We're talking about you have a range from 1 to infinity, and some of these numbers fall every time in these certain ranges. And why is that? We talk about sacred geometry a little bit. We talk about some of these numbers and how some of it looks just beyond that there has to be something there. And, we continue talking about that on this channel. Michael Talbot, The Holographic Universe, he wrote a great book, a series kind of about that. It's a little deep. So when I was done, I actually wrote a companion book about it, and links are going to be down in the description. But I love that journey for me. I love learning about someone else's ideas, even as crazy and complicated as sometimes they can be. Itzhak Bentov was another one of those. His musings, the way he explained things, can be very hard to wrap your brain around. He was great with diagrams. For me, I took to it like a duck to water. I really enjoyed the way he explained how the holographic universe, and through oscillation and vibration consciousness, there was a connection in there, and it really resonated with me even to today. So, yep, Talbot, Holographic Universe, I definitely recommend that one. And then there's other books, but a lot of people just don't have time to read as many books. So I think I'm going to start doing some audiobooks or something like that. I think that's why a lot of people like to coming on here, just hearing about some of their ideas and how they play an important role in 2026. And I like taking a look at that. Why do they still hold water? Why do these ships that have been at sea battered so long, and these are the theories that these people have come up with, why do they still hold water? Why do people still look for those ships? Why do people still look in those ships for answers? So it's a metaphor that I use here on this channel is, how did these scientists work as far back as a long time ago? Why do they still hold water? And one of them that we talk about is that underlining holographic universe theory of how every part of everything contains the whole. There's information we see sometimes. I'm definitely a believer of information theory, and how there is a correlation to a lot of things in nature, how there almost shouldn't be because of the range of things, between the numbers and everything else that we have. Certain numbers, like I said, the golden ratio 1.618, it's we see that at shells, galaxies, we see that in branching of trees. It's one thing that I'm looking at a lot. That concept comes from Leonardo of Pisa, 1202. He wrote a book called Liber Abaci. If you haven't read that one, go check that one out. 1202, hard to get your hands on a first edition copy of that. Luckily, it is available online. That's how I'm reading some of these old ones. In that book, he's teaching, he talks about, right then he's teaching the Europe system. They were still using the Roman numerical system, and then he's teaching them it's a Hindu Arabic system that we now use kind of today for for math, basically. He was a medieval Italian mathematician, Leonardo of Pisa, and he had spent some time in India, and he was a smart man, and he saw how the problems in his own country got solved over there, and basically he was trying to bring that back, his whole idea of the numerical system and currency conversion measurements. That book covered a lot of things, and the golden ratio is in there. We find it. Later on, there was other people that do work on his stuff and make the connection. There was a mathematician in the 19th century called Edward Lucas, who was taking a look and popularized, and that's why we call it Fibonacci. His sequence is what we call it, and he popularized it, and we've used it, we've taken a look at it. Science to this day still very speculative. Is there a correlation? There's a correlation to a lot of things in nature. Can we use that for anything specific? Is it refined? No, unfortunately. It's one of those, it's how we get a broader picture of things. We can't use it like a caliper for exact measurement. That's why scientists are very speculative about things that are not very rough in nature. But it's good. Like I said, it goes 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and it continues, and there's a connection with it. It's called the golden ratio. There's a few things like this in nature that we, as scientists, still take a look at, and we see there's some connection. In fact, we'll use it every once in a while. We'll throw, have you thrown the book at it? And that will literally be Leonardo da Pisa's 1202 piece called Libra Bacci. That's what we're going to throw at it. That's the book. And why? Because it's got the golden ratio in it. There's a lot of things like this. There's a lot of things that we would throw at solving some things, not to solve the initial problem, but we would solve what is going on here in a general sense, and then we can refine it. Numerical, is there hard coding in nature? Can I look in it like a microscope and see coding in it? No, I see a bunch of stuff. I see all sorts of random, at every level of microscope, all the way down to the atomic level. I see a lot of complex stuff going on there that you would not even see with the naked eye, even if you could see it with the naked eye. What do you mean by that, Will? Well, let's take a look at DNA and the double helix structure. Even if you saw that back in a microscope, way back in the day, you still wouldn't know what it was. Why? Because it doesn't say DNA on it. It doesn't say this is what this is. There's no function out of it. Like I said, we knew about DNA from the 1800s from Meissner. He found it in the nuclei. He called it nuclein. But that's all we knew about it until the 40s and the 50s. And actually, it was 50s. Watson and Crick. We can go back a little bit earlier, where there was a lot of people working with hereditary information trace, and that's why we talk about Erwin Schrödinger. I did on his last piece in What is Life. And in that book, he talks about aperiodic crystal and how there must be something inside of you that contains that information, that carries it from one generation to another. He philosophically approached that with the idea he had, and that's it. So Meissner found it. Another guy said, there must be something, and it was like about 11 years later that Watson and Crick, it was Franklin Rosalind doing X-rays, diffracting machines, and her student Gosling really was one that took the famous photo 51. But we can talk about that on another episode. Coffee's out. Gonna have to get some water soon. But no, there's connections to get to one place to another. But a lot of it, what I talk about here, is if there was ever a connection. Am I from Scotland? No, sir. I wish I was. I wish I was in Scotland right now. I probably have some Scottish background. My family definitely probably came over on boat at some point. There's definitely some Irish, Scottish in me. But I don't know too much about my family history, to be honest with you. I know that I have some Dutch too in me. The name Piles from there. That's my last name. But welcome in wherever you guys are from. If you want to put where you're from, you can. I'm from California originally, Northern California, about an hour and a half north of Sacramento. There's a town called Chico. Actually, I came from a smaller town outside of that. I went to a school called Durham, and even a smaller town out of that is where I lived. Is a place called Dayton. In Dayton, there was a cemetery, and that's about it. It's true. I do have some reddish hair. I'm glad to have any hair at 47. I think the lack of stress, the positive attitude, and I do try to eat somewhat healthier nowadays than I did when I was a kid. It just doesn't treat me as good anymore. I try to go for walks a lot with, out in nature. But like I said, they used to call it a ginger. They used to call it just a redhead, carrot top. The good thing about being 2026, you could be whatever you want to be and look however you want to be. So that's what I got. I do appreciate you guys coming in. Thank you for the comments. Every bit helps. Like I said, if you dig what I'm doing here, hit that like, hit that subscribe. And we're going to keep going. If anybody has a subject that you want me to talk about, whether it's coding, consciousness, what we're working on, where we're at, you guys know about quantum entanglement, you guys know about ghost cameras, where we're at with taking pictures when the camera's not even there, something called entanglement. There's a lot of amazing things happening right now in this world. There's a lot of amazing technology that's coming out that just blew my mind. Quantum quantum cameras, quantum entangled cameras are something that the Pile Advanced Research, that's the lab that I work with here. I own it. I'm the CEO, William Pyle, and the amount of technology is amazing now. Now some of these are in the multi-millions, billions, and some of these are like attachments or apps that blow my mind. There was one the other day I just saw where you can see the moon so much closer just with a handheld thing than you could years ago. I know when I was in school, seeing the moon up close, seeing craters, required so much more. Telescopes. Same thing with microscopes. Anybody get that? In microscopes are so much different. When I went to school, especially in high school, it was like it was like the old school, got to put a sample on there. And then later I'm in a lab and he's showing, we're going to go take a look at the microscope. It's perfect. And he brings up on the screen and it's atoms. It's individual atoms. And whoa, these are some of the crazy technologies that we're using nowadays and finding and we're enjoying. And like I said, there are so much more discoveries that are going to be made, I think, this year in the next 4 or 5 years. As long as we can keep the stupid stuff out, things like war, things like hate, there is no place for them in science and humanity. We're solving things in here, and it takes all kinds. I really do think it does, and I'm hoping that over the next few years, we're going to see things like teleportation. I think we're going to see things like warp drives. Well, teleportation, what do you mean like that? Well, I probably don't mean it in the more sense that a lot of people think about it, but we will have some more grounding stuff. Things like quantum entanglement, that would be the rabbit hole that people, what am I talking about? Quantum entanglement, go down that road. Things that we can affect here can affect over there, instantaneous. Faster than the speed of light. This is one of the things that we talk about later on. And coding, we go back to coding. Well, how is that possible? Well, in quantum mechanics, at that super small level where things can act as both particles and waves, and strange things happen when that happens. I love the analogies of quantum mechanics, and there's one that I think about all the time where when you get really small down to these type things, I use a marble, for example. You roll a marble up a hill. If you don't roll it far enough, it rolls back down. That would be what normally happens in our normal observable world. But what happens in the quantum world is that marble sometimes rolls up that hill, disappears, appears on the other side of the hill, and continues. Well, how does that happen? How does that work? Well, you see, at those levels, it acts not only as a particle, as a wave. And just like a pier, down by the ocean, you can see the wave hit that pier, and the wave kind of continues on past that pier. That's a little bit of the metaphorical examples that I explain here to try to explain to people about the magic still in our world and in science, and how we don't understand it. We are learning. I think the real world books about magic are some of these things about quantum mechanics and quantum theory. I think if we just change the name to Magic 101, we'd get about 1 billion more people to research it. But we kind of stuck with quantum mechanics and quantum theory, which is kind of stupid names, and doesn't really explain everything that has to do with the field. Like I said, I think names are in everything, especially when you're talking about atoms, people naming atoms. It would have been a lot easier for most of us all over the world if we named atoms something more easier instead of named after some of the finders or founders of them. So that's what I got. If you guys have anything, like I said, post it down below. I'm going to keep doing kind of these podcasts every day here if I get some time. If you're enjoying it, hit that like, hit that subscribe. Help support the channel. Go on to Kindle or Amazon. Look my name up, William Pyle, and you're going to find some books that I've written about all sorts of these crazy subjects. That helps support the channel, but also I give away. I give back to the community. For a lot of people that can't afford books, I do give away a couple of my books a month is what I'm trying to do right now. Just so, because I think a lot of the work that we do here is important and it shouldn't be limited to those that can afford it. If you can if you can dig with that and support it, hit that like, hit that subscribe, and as always, I hope you guys are having a beautiful day. One problem that I have with my channel is I did a massive research about Itzhak Bentov and his connection with the consciousness and the research, and love his work even to this day. And I wrote a serious masterpiece on him fairly recently, and that's doing really well on Amazon and Kindle. There's just nobody that really dove into him as much as somebody should have, and that's where I kind of did some great work, and that work actually is getting seen by some great places. So I'm really happy with that. Talbot's is another one. Michael Talbot's work isn't looked at enough, and I think both of these were undervalued because they use the word hologram or holographic universe, and those theories are very one, speculative, two, they don't lend themselves to very big benefits. Even if you knew that the universe was made of holographic information, that one part contained the whole, the problem is that we've been splitting atoms and smashing them with hadron colliders for a while now. Finding that code in deeper, we just haven't found it. If you go from the eye view all through the different kind of micro levels that we can view of different existence of reality that we can observe, all the way down to the atomic level, we just don't see that universal code. Now, does it not mean it's there? No. The fact is we keep smashing atoms, smashing smaller pieces to get smaller pieces, and guess what? We are actually finding new, smaller pieces. Not just halves of the old. We're finding new substances in a way, and the best way I can explain that. So I'm it's always magic to me when I see these things happen. Science gets a bad name, and I think it's because how a lot of us grew up with school with science and math, and how it wasn't the most entertaining thing. A lot of times it was forced upon us, and we left a bad taste in our mouth about equations and math. And a lot of that stuff I remember back in the day, there wasn't a lot of like storytelling about this, where these equations came from, why they are important to the universe, and maybe why we use them today. And I think that's the big difference between like maybe how your teachers taught math and how some of this is really getting across and resonating with audiences on YouTube and other people who may have the desire to look up in the stars or solve these more complicated issues and just never really had a lot of the maybe it's the funding, maybe it's the limited brain capacity, but they had the heart. And I always say this on the channel, like I said, if you have that strong determination and that love for the game, you're in the right place. You are in the right field. Being philosophical about the world doesn't require that of you. There was a lot of people in the past who we give massive credit for who did not have the chops that a lot of people think they needed to have, whether it was in math or chemistry or physics. I know a lot of those people. In fact, a lot of those received Nobel Prizes for fields that wasn't their initial field. A lot of times they may lean on people they know or universities to fill in some of that information on an idea that they had that maybe played into a field they were working on. So if anybody does have any questions, like I said, put them down below. I'll be happy to answer some of them. Just wanted to talk about some of the connections. I'm going to try to tie this all back up with coding inside of this. Do we see literal coding in the universe? We see some repetitive numbers. We see some things like, pi or, radius. And we talk about the golden ratio, Leonardo Pisa, and we talk about, some of these numbers. they're not normal numbers. They're not 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They are normally other numbers in between those numbers. But what's really weird for me is, being a number person that I am, it could have been any number between 1 and infinity, and instead it's like 1.618. It's a small number. 3.1, you know what I'm saying? These are smaller, easily, not easily, but more understood, more able to make sense of numbers. Is there a reason for that? Is there a reason that we're introduced, or that the human brain can see these smaller numbers and make more corrections and connections with them? And as we advance, here we are in 2026, we can handle larger numbers now. And so we're getting introduced to larger numbers theories, information theories, larger sequences of important numbers. So, do I see hard coding in it? Man, this world is so complex. Do I see a single code amongst it that I could use for one situation that I can always apply to the next one? Could I see some code in there somewhere? Always, in every existence of space-time, in a vacuum, in a black hole, in the sun? Would these numbers still hold true? I don't know. These are the questions that we ask. The short answer is no. A lot of it is based on Earth physics and laws that would support, a lot of the things that we deal with. But a lot of that gets thrown out the damn window when we start talking about gravity or black holes and stuff like that. We have some math. And in fact, a lot of people would argue that we have more math about things like that, like chaos theory, than we do of complexity stuff, like things like me and you. We have a lot of math about the simple stuff. We have a lot of math about the chaos theory, even as crazy math as that is. Our math on that is really, really good. Where it's weird is in the middle. It's where you have a mixture of things that are, in our world, things that are fairly simple with things that are more complex. And then you have living structures that are a mix of those. So when I start talking about, is there coding, I start thinking about maybe, but not in the normal coding that I think a lot of people are looking for, whether it's in math. It reminds me of Erwin Schrödinger's book back in 1944, like, what is life? There must be something inside that contains some information. But it must be something more complex than what we are and can see right now. Hopefully, that's what he said. And I'm going to say it about this. And 11 years later, they solved his issue. I'm hoping maybe 10, 11 years from now, somebody will solve that. That's what we're going on. Being philosophical, extracting brilliant ideas from brilliant peoples and applying those in a very simple way to very, very real equations of today. Let me just say that. And like I said, I'm going to stand by. I think there is a baked-in code for a lot of things, and why I think this is, for a couple of great reasons. I think about how life could not exist without some form of a rising structure of that defeats entropy, because usually what happens, what we see in nature, is that complex systems rise, and then chaos happens very quickly. So I think that there is something baked in. There is a code, but maybe unwritten. You know what I'm saying? Remember those old sayings that it's the unwritten code of the West? Everybody knew about it, but nobody talked about it. It feels like that. It feels like things know how they should behave, because that's how things are for whatever reason. And I think that there is a baked-in code. whether we can see it, whether we agree on it, we played with this idea that if we all agreed that there is a baked-in code, would that make it real? The short answer on that one was no. We've done select group testing on idea theory, and the idea is that no, what I can say about it is any population that's growing consistently and evolving over time, new ideas are absolutely guaranteed. That is a phenomenon. That will not happen in other species. It will happen in this species. In other species, mammalian, birds, there's a few others that evolve very quickly over time, um, and and can break out of the evolution life-kill cycle. Um, you know, and so I believe there is some coding in that. I think about the Colin's work with the Human Genome Project, how he'd probably tell you, man, I've got a lot of coding here. There is a lot of coding that repeats. There's a lot of coding here that we use to map the human genome. We use that today in things like CRISPR to edit DNA and do experiments on that kind of stuff in ethical ways. But I think we are going to talk about here soon about how ethical research is very different than the unethical research that gets done even nowadays. And I specifically have no known knowledge of unethical research that gets happened regarding this stuff personally. But as a scientist, we know that happens in every field. We end up abusing things to extract data in some of the most horrific ways to achieve scientific discovery. So, and these fields are never excluded from that. Make no mistake, there's been many sacrifices on people's lives in the pursuit of universal code, information theory, and how we found out about such things. Everything from shooting x-rays and people getting radioactive. There was prices that paid for discoveries in this stuff. So unfortunately, as we go through 2026 and beyond, I do believe that there's been a lot of labs and scientists that have limited this in many ways by protecting scientists, labs, and the research and housing this stuff. There has been massive progress as far as protecting the researchers to the best of their knowledge. But every time you smash a atom at some crazy level, we really don't know what's going to happen. We know that it happens in nature. We know that it creates small black holes that kind of collapse upon themselves because they can't sustain themselves. We know a lot of crazy things might happen, but we don't know. Just like we can hypothesize what's going to happen tomorrow with the weather. We can have a good guess. We're really good at guessing the weather now after thousands of years of doing that. Is there a code in the weather? No, because tomorrow, when the weather hits and shit happens, we have no real idea what is going to truly happen. The reason for that, and I know you've probably heard it in your area, like I'm in Michigan right now, that Michigan weather said it was supposed to be sunny today. A lot of people say this because as predictable as we are with simulations with weather, as good as we are getting here with AI models for weather, shit's unpredictable. It's complex is the problem. But we get better and better over time. I think that's why I'm saying about the coding, we're really good about the overall kind of coding of it. We can say within a very high accuracy level what is going to happen in a lot of situations nowadays. In that correlation right there is a coding in there. There's a connection. There's something in ratios and probabilities and things that we can take a look at and say, why is that? Why can we see that? Why Why is there a consistent patterns? And patterns are codes, you know. But I will say, because of how complex our world is, and there's different codes for different things, I think they do interact in different ways. Can that code change? I don't think it's so much that the code is changing as much as it's interacting. Just like math equations, like you throw a math equation out in space, but then it hits something, right? And that creates another equation or something, you know? So I think there's other, it is on underlining code, but I think there's so much complexity going on there that those codes end up getting smashed. And sometimes when we smash those codes, we discover things, we see things, you know, whoa, what's that there? It's because we've taken a code from something else and we've smashed it with another code. I don't know. That's what I got about on that one here today. That's my ideas. I'm gonna pretty much leave it off at that. This video is going over an hour right now of my podcast of patterns. Do I believe they exist? What do we know about them in 2026, and what I personally believe? So I'm hoping that you guys enjoyed this. If you did, hit that like and subscribe. I'm going to be uploading this video and seeing if it gets any traction. I will be still making another one up there. And like I said, any support for the channel, any love would be much appreciated if you did what we did here today. And as always, you guys have a beautiful day.